How much longer, Jim? I asked. I was riding shotgun with my college roommate on our way to his parents' house. Due to federal holidays, we had a 4-day weekend off. Jim had invited me to spend the weekend at his family's home down in San Diego. He had invited me several times before, and even though I had things to do, I couldn't turn him down again. We should be there in an hour. Looks like I judged the traffic right. We should be in before the afternoon rush, replied Jim. My family is really looking forward to meeting you, Eric. Actually, it was amazing that Jim and I were best friends. James Emerson Watson too came from a wealthy family and was in pre-med and carrying a 4.0 GPA. He had been an all-state football player, and he actually turned down several athletic scholarships and had instead accepted a full academic scholarship. He was 6'3" and in great shape. He was a real chick magnet. Rich, good-looking, smart, these qualities could have produced a real asshole, but Jim was blessed with a great personality too. He was instantly likable. I was a single child from a middle-class family. My grades were pretty good. I had picked up a small academic scholarship. I was studying to become a teacher. I was in okay shape, but nowhere near Jim's status. We had met while we were both doing time in the dorms. I was once joking about how I couldn't wait until my freshman year was over so I could get paroled. Jim found this funny and out of the blue asked me if I was looking for a roommate. I was kind of surprised, as I really didn't know him that well. It turned out that both of us were taking classes over the summer. We ended up getting a 2-bedroom house about 3 miles from campus. The rent was a little out of my range, but Jim said don't worry about it, that it was worth the extra money to have someone he could get along with. It turned out that Jim and I were perfectly matched. We were both serious about our studies and really didn't want our place to become party central. He wanted to do his best and uphold the family honor. His father was a leading surgeon. I was an okay cook, and that suited Jim just fine. He joked that he could burn water. Jim wasn't a monk and always seemed to have a new girlfriend every few weeks. I became his sidekick, and as a fringe benefit, Jim got me several dates. His relationships never seemed to last long. He said he wasn't interested in anything serious, as he wanted to concentrate on his studies. I soothed a lot of broken hearts. We kept the same place for the next few years. It actually felt like home. I had taken on most of the hose work. I figured that since he was carrying a heavier workload and that he was paying more, it was the least I could do. Here we are, announced Jim. His voice snapped me out of my daydreaming. I let out a low whistle as we stepped out of the car. Nice house, I exclaimed. The house was huge and it even had an ocean view. Thanks, replied Jim as he parked the car. We grabbed our bags and Jim let us in. His parents were there to greet us. His mother gave him a big kiss and a long hug. I could see his ears turning red from being embarrassed. I couldn't help but chuckle. His father introduced himself and shook my hand. It is good to meet you. Jimmy has always spoke highly of you, Eric, said Dr. Watson. His mother then came over to me and gave me a hug. It's like I already know you, Eric. It is so good that Jimmy finally talked you into visiting, she said. I looked over at Jim and mouthed, Jimmy? He just glared at me and gave me a look like, don't you dare call me Jimmy. We went into the living room and sat down. Jim's parents told us that his sister was also staying the weekend. Kim was Jim's older sister. She was 2 years older than him. From what I had heard, she was almost as brilliant as Jim. She had graduated college in 3 years and had just become a lawyer. At one point, when both of his parents walked out of the room, I asked him, so do your parents call her Kimmy? I had a big smile on my face. Jim looked at me and said with a false threatening manner, call me Jimmy just once and you can walk back to school. Hey, my family has a nickname for me too, no big deal, I replied, knowing that I had something new to needle him with now. Both parents came back in again and Jim and his dad talked about taking him down to the hospital tomorrow and show him around. Mrs. Watson leaned over and asked me if I could give her a hand. I agreed and she led me out to the kitchen. She was preparing some coffee and asked me if I wanted coffee or tea. I told her tea. I never acquired a taste for coffee. She turned and put the tea kettle on the stove. As the water boiled, she asked me several questions. Some were about Jim and how was he doing, and some were directed at me. She seemed very interested in the fact that I was going to teach. She thanked me for cooking. She had nightmares of Jim eating nothing but junk food. She showed me where she kept the tea and told me to feel at home and help myself in the future. She took out a tea box and said that this was one of her favorites. It was a special blend of chai. It smelled very good and I thought, why not? I helped he bring the coffee and tea into the living room. I was the only one drinking tea. It had a very soothing aroma and had a very good taste. Mrs. Watson saw my reaction and said, I thought you'd like it. I asked her where she got it and she told me that it came from a specialty shop in La Jolla and she would be happy to take me there. Just then Jim's sister came in and I was introduced. Kim was the same height as me. She had short brunette hair, cut into a professional look. She was still in her work clothes. She had on a navy skirt and jacket and a white silk blouse. I had to admit she had great legs. I also noticed the engagement ring on her finger. Jim had told me she was due to get married to a naval officer next summer. Still, I took an instant like to her. Something told me that we would become great friends. She gave me a hug, just like her mom. So I finally get to meet the person who keeps my brother out of trouble, she said with a charming smile. Mom, I'm going upstairs to change, I really need to get out of these heels. She joined us a few minutes later and was now in jeans and a sweater. So Mom has introduced you her favorite tea, she said to me as she took a cup of coffee. It is too strong for me, I prefer something milder. We talked for a couple of hours. I found myself talking mostly to Kim and Carol, as Mrs. Watson insisted I call her. Jim and his father were locked in a deep medical discussion about what field he should specialize in. Carl stood up and looking at Kim and I asked us to give her a hand getting dinner ready. I felt it was the least I could do and I helped Kim clean up the cups. Once in the kitchen, Carol put Kim and I to work. We continued talking as we worked on preparing dinner. Kim asked me questions about my family and my plans after college. She also talked about work and the pending wedding plans. It may have been my imagination, but the conversation was become more like the girl talk I had seen whenever my mom and her sisters got together. Dinner was great and I was truly feeling like one of the family. After dinner, Jim and Mr. Watson disappeared into his study. I was left with the girls and helped them clear the table. As before, I had tea while Carol and Kim drank coffee. We talked a few more hours. Carol said since Jimmy was going in with his father in the morning, I was free to join them tomorrow. She said that they had some shopping to do and a few other errands. They were also going out to lunch. I agreed to join them. It beat sitting alone in a strange house watching TV by myself. Kim went up with me and showed me my room. The guest room was nice, although it was a bit feminine. The room was done in a floral design. Everything was coordinated so that even the bedspread had roses on it. Kim must have sensed my feeling. I know it is a bit over the top, but Mom likes to play around with interior design. She walked me in and opened a side door. I think this makes it more tolerable. The door led to a private bathroom. I looked in and saw that there was also a large bathtub. Kim smiled and said, "That tub is fantastic. You can practically do laps in it. It also has jet sprays in it. I sneak in here when I visit, just to use it." She opened the cabinet and showed me a bottle of bubble bath. She looked at me and smiled. "Trust me, the combination of the tub and the bubble bath is almost as good as sex. It will really relax you." After I unpacked, I decided to take her advice. As I slipped into the hot, relaxing waters, I felt a sense of total comfort. The scent from the bubble bath was very pleasant. I couldn't quite place what it was. The bottle was no help, as there was no writing on it. I guess they get everything custom. I lay there for almost an hour. At one point I was so relaxed that I almost dozed off. After I died myself off, I barely made it into bed before falling asleep. I woke around 7 o'clock and felt totally refreshed. I remembered that I was going out with Kim and her mom. I still had a hard time calling her by her first. I heard a knock on the door and then Kim's voice. "Just so you know, you don't need to get real dressed up. Jeans and a sweater will work just fine." I did as Kim said. I almost felt as if I had to do what she said, almost like it was an order, but that quickly faded. I joined them downstairs in the kitchen. Kim was having coffee and a bagel and Carol was talking on the phone. "So one more won't be a problem then?" "That's wonderful, thank you so much. See you at 9, said Carol as she hung up the phone. She gave Kim a knowing smile and picked up her cup of tea and took a long sip. "Good morning, you look refreshed," said Kim. "What do you want for breakfast?" I didn't feel very hungry and settled some tea and a bagel with cream cheese. "I guess that Jim and Dr. Watson have already left?" I asked, taking my first sip of the tea. "Yes, they left before 7 o'clock, replied Carol. She looked at her watch. "So why don't we plan on heading into town around 8:30? Kim and I agreed, even though I really didn't know where we were going or what we were doing. Kim asked me if I used the tub last night. I told her that I did and that it was very relaxing. I wanted to ask her what was in the bubble bath, but by then we were heading out the door. As we drove into town, Kim asked me if Jim had a steady girl. She said that now that he was engaged, all the pressure was on him to get married. I told her that I didn't foresee anything in the near future, as he was too much into his studies. I told them that he didn't want to get married until after med school. Carol jumped in and said that Jimmy sounded so much like his father. She told a story how he was going to stay a bachelor until he got his first practice. I asked her when did they get married. She just smiled and said that they were married before he even started med school. She said that she had put her career on hold and if it weren't for her help he never would have graduated. We pulled into a parking lot and Carol turned and looked at her daughter. She asked her, "So do you think he's ready?" Kim just nodded and looked back at me and smiled. "Eric, Mom and I want to treat you. We had appointments made for our favorite day spa and we wanted to include you," said Kim. "Don't worry, even my dad has been here." I was dumbfounded and could only nod yes. Kim said, "That's great, you are going to love the work they do here." We walked in and were met by a very elegant-looking woman. She apparently knew Carol and Kim. She looked at me and introduced herself. I was to call her Kelly and she promised that I was going to experience something that I would never forget. She led me into a dressing room and told me to get undressed and to put on the robe that was hanging on a hook. As I undressed, I thought I heard her voice through the door. She seemed to be asking Carol if I had been properly prepped. What she was saying didn't make any sense and I put it out of my mind. The robe was very fluffy and soft and felt very nice against my bare body. Kelly came back in and had me follow her into a small room. There was a chair, similar to a dentist's chair, in the middle of the room. Soft, soothing music was playing in the background. The lighting was subdued and there was a very pleasant aroma, something that seemed to cross between citrus and floral. I felt instantly relaxed as I took a seat in the chair. Kelly asked me if I would like something to drink and I nodded yes. Hey, if I was going to go through this, I wanted the full treatment. She returned with a cup of tea. Carol says that you like this blend, she said as she handed me the cup. Now, I have a few questions to ask you before we get started. Kelly began to ask me questions about my health, my skin type, etc. I was becoming very sleepy and could barely keep my eyes open. As I was drifting off, I felt Kelly take the cup of tea out my hand. Well, I see that you are ready to start, said Kelly. Then as just before I drifted off, I heard her say good night, Erica. I drifted off into the most wonderful peaceful sleep. I knew my body was being stimulated, yet it was so soothing that I stayed asleep. Additionally, I was having the most wonderful dreams. They were so vivid and lifelike. It was like I was reliving my life. Except something was different and I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I was back at home with my parents, going to school, having birthday parties and other family celebrations. I moved on to high school and then college. At college, I ran into Jim again. This time, however, I wasn't his roommate. I was his girlfriend and I was deeply in love with him. He was also in love with me. It all seemed so real. When he kissed me, I could actually feel him. Suddenly, I was back in the real world. I felt Kelly's hand on arm gently waking me up. Now just lay there for a few minutes, you've been out for almost 6 hours, she said. I'll go get Kim. My mind was foggy, but it was slowly clearing. I felt very relaxed. Just as the Kim entered the room, I sat up. It was then that I became aware of how different everything was. I was still in my robe, but my body was different. I opened up the robe and saw that I was now female. I gasped as I saw my new body. I looked up at Kim and asked, What has happened to me? She put her hand on my shoulder. Erica, you have been given a great gift. What I remember most was that I was neither angry nor shocked. Somehow the transformation wasn't just physical. I could feel myself changing internally. My mind, my memories, and my sense of self were all changing. Don't worry, I know you are confused, but I am here for you, said Kim in a comforting voice. I don't understand, Kim. Why is this happening? I asked as I continued to examine my lovely new body. There was no doubt that I was now female. My body was very nice. Long, smooth legs, my breasts were firm, round, and looked like C-cup. I had longer hair, but couldn't see the color. Kim must have sensed my need and handed me a mirror. As I looked at my new face, I heard Kim's reply, Erica, you were selected for this gift because we sensed that deep down you were meant to be a woman. I put down the mirror and looked at her and stated, if that was supposed to clear everything up, it didn't work. She just smiled. I guess you were right, but both Mom and I could feel that you were meant to born female. We are just correcting a minor error by Mother Nature. She sat down next to me and continued speaking. The women in our family have been blessed with a gift that allows us to see life and nature in terms that most cannot. We also know skills and techniques that allow us to make corrections. She paused for a second and continued. Kelly is my aunt and both she and my mom were taught by our grandmother. As their daughter, I have had the gifts passed down to me. I will do the same for my daughters. The gift isn't passed on to male children, so Jim is normal, more or less. She could tell that I was hooked by her story, so she continued. Jimmy can pass the gift on to the next generation. So it is very important that he marries the right woman. The women of the male are responsible to pick that woman. In this case, that is you, Erica. Her words went to my soul. I looked at her and thought about what I was going to say next. You mean that my daughters will have your gifts? I said, and in that instant I totally accepted my fate. Kim smiled and leaned down and gave me a long hug. Welcome to the family, Erica. She helped me get dressed. I was slowly adapting to the fact that I was now female. I put on my bra, panties, and denim skirt. As I buttoned my blouse, Kim styled my hair. She then helped me put on my makeup. I looked at myself in the full-length mirror and saw a beautiful young woman looking back at me. In a flash, my new look was familiar. I knew this was I, not some stranger. So Erica, you were an only child, right? Asked Kim. Yes, that is right, I replied. Well, think of me as your sister from now on, replied Kim. She must have noticed I seemed worried. Erica, look at me. As far as anyone else is concerned, you were born female. Your family only has memories of you being a girl. In fact, in time your own memories of being a boy will fade, much like a dream. In fact, if you don't believe me, look in your purse. I did as she suggested and saw that every piece of identification showed me as female. I also looked at a family photo and it too showed me as Erica. I leaned over to her and she hugged me. I couldn't help but cry, but they were tears of relief and joy, not those of grief. Outside the room I greeted my future mother-in-law. She was delighted how quickly I adapted to my new look. She commented that it was a great improvement. The rest of the day was spent shopping and talking. I learned that they had suspected my true nature by the way Jim was attached to me. At first they were worried he might be gay, but once they met me they knew the truth. She said that the tea and was used to both test me and to prepare my body. If my true nature weren't really female, then the tea would have tasted too spicy. The bubble bath was also a preparatory stage. It made my body more accepting of the transformation. I asked if Jimmy would be aware of the change. They said no. To him I was his long-term girlfriend. Also his father would be unaware that I had once been male. Kim added that this just proves how unaware men are. We all laughed at her joke. Back at the house, Kim helped me get changed for dinner. She told me that she had always wanted a sister and that we would become great friends. I truly believed her. Sure enough, that night at dinner Jimmy proposed to me. I looked down in teary eyes at the lovely ring he slipped on my finger. I was so happy and so deeply in love with him. The rest of the night was a blur. I remember getting hugs from my new family and calling my parents to tell that Jim had asked me to marry him. 6 months later we got married. Jimmy would be entering med school in the fall and I would look after our home. Although we planned to not start a family until after he was in practice, nature cannot be stopped. Our daughter was born 2 years later. Her Aunt Kim and grandmother cannot wait to help me teach her the special powers that have been passed down to her. To think it all started with a long weekend's visit.